Good morning, Rabotai. We're going to start with our sponsorships for today. We have a TALMUD Torah sponsor by Shmuel and Leba Dinovitz for zechus and aliyas neshama for HaRav Peretz Avraham ben Harav Benyamin Moshe Zol. Daf Yomi sponsorship by Greg and Rachel Leviton. Thank you. In commemoration of the yahrzeit of Rachel's father, Burton Schreiber ben Sion ben Yisrael Shimon Zol. Thank you. I'm going to pull up the mic. Wonderful. Today's daf is Kesuvos Yudalad. I am Rabbi Kovacs, or Kalman Akiva ben Eliezer, Kaba, if you like. If you like to go by your name and your father's name, I think maybe we'll bring back that minhag. So everyone's father is important, as we're going to see, as we started saying yesterday, as we're going to see today. So yesterday on Yud Gimel, we had an amazing Mishnah where a woman was speaking to a man behind closed doors, and Rabban Gamliel believes her to say who that man was. There was obviously more than just speaking going on, because if it was just speaking, we don't need to know who the man was. And then a second case the Mishnah brought where she shows up milberet, she shows up pregnant. So there was definitely more than just talking going on. And Rabban Gamliel still believes the woman to say who the man was that she was involved with, and she can say that he is kosher, he's a Kohen, so she's not psula kahuna. That's great. Rabbi Yehoshua in both cases was machmir. Lo mipia anu chayin. That's what Rabbi Yehoshua said. He said we don't necessarily believe her, and we're going to speak out more about Rabbi Yeshua's opinion today. So Rabbi left off kind of in the middle of things. We are about 20 lines up on 13b. Thank you so much. Ein Moshe. Wow. Hazak Baruch to Moshe for the tech support and the coffee support. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam kol niyeh b'dvaro. Wow. It's good. So Rabbi Silver was saying yesterday, we were at Ein apotropos l'arayah. The first word on the line is apotropos. It's about 20 odd lines up. So the situation is, once a man and a woman are behind closed doors, there's no guarantee. Ein apotropos l'arayot. The Rav is speaking out. This is an important thing. You know, if we're in the base medrash and everyone's here and we're learning, Baruch Hashem, we have sort of that positive peer pressure. But behind closed doors, you have to be more careful. There is no guarantees in life. So Ketani Mihat. Anyways, it teaches Tarte, two cases. The Mishnah had two cases, Midaberet, merely speaking, which was not merely speaking, it was euphemism, Umilberet, and when she shows up pregnant. Tivta Rav Asi, Tivta. So this is a Tivta to Rav Asi's understanding of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Good, so moving on to Tepuk Lei, T'chasam Rav Psulim Mitzvah. So it's different there. Now we're talking about Rabbi Yehoshua, who's machmir. Now Rabbi Yehoshua was machmir. We brought a case comparing to our Mishnah, a case of Nebuch, a shvuya. Now this is not a shvuah, which is an oath. This is a shvuya. She was Nebuch captured by bandits, by the non-Jewish bandits would commonly capture women for their own amusement. A terrible situation. And the assumption is because these men are violent and aggressive and immoral, they did take advantage of their captives. We are going to see some exceptions. If they just took someone to ransom, then maybe they would leave her alone because they know they can get more money. But in general, they were very chashud on arayas, and these men had no qualms about violating women. So there, it's rov psulin etzla. All of these guys are, problematic. These bandits who have captured this woman. Hacha rov ksherin etzla. But here in the city, she's living in a Jewish city, is the assumption of the Mishnah, and she shows up pregnant, or we know she was behind closed doors with a man. It's mostly, nice Jewish guys, so thank God she has some assistance. So Messiah Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So this supports the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, L'divrei machshir, the one who says kosher. Remember, that's Rabban Gamliel in our Mishnah, who says we believe the woman to say who the father is. Afilu barov pasulin. He is so makel and so reliant on the woman. He says even in rov pasulin, even if there were a bunch of bandits or heathens around, we'd still believe her. She knows from whom she got pregnant. The Divrei Apostle, Rabbi Yeshua, says we don't believe her. Posel Fibrov Kasherin. He says we wouldn't believe her even in the city, with a Jewish city, with nice Jewish boys around. Okay, there's nice Jewish boys, but things happen behind closed doors. Ein apotropos l'arayos. Amar Rabbi Yochanan l'divrei hamachshir bo machshir bebita. If we say the woman herself is kosher, in this sense we mean kosher l'kahuna, that the man she was living with was not a cholol or a mamzer or an eved or a problem like that. She's still kosher to marry a Kohen. So he says we're machshir even her daughter. The Divrei Apostle Bob, Rabbi Yeshua, who says we don't believe her about the man she was with, Posel babita. We also posel her daughter. Her daughter also can't marry a Kohen. Rabbi Elazar Omer l'divrei machshir ba posel bavita. He says, no, Rabban Gamliel, who says the woman is still kosher to marry a Kohen, we believe her to say who she was with. We don't necessarily believe her daughter. Amar Rabba, my time with Rabbi Elazar, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Elazar? I mean, if the mother's kosher to marry a Kohen, the daughter from that relationship should probably also be kosher. We're assuming she lived with a kosher man, a man who's not posel to kuna, who's not a cholol, doesn't make her a cholola, of this nature. So bishla ma'ihi. So it's better her herself. Isla chazoka de kashrus. She has chezkos kashrus, a chazaka, a pre-existing situation of being kosher. After all, this woman, the woman who shows up pregnant, we know who her parents are. We know for sure that she started off when she was born with these kosher parents. No one's a chalal, no one's a mamzer, everyone's great, mazel tov. She's born and she's kosher l'kahuna. And now we're not sure, we know something happened with a man behind closed doors. We're not sure if that man was problematic to her yichus or not, so we can rely on her chazaka. But Bita Laisla Chazaka, her daughter, coming out of this suffix relationship where we're not necessarily sure who the man was, she's born into a state of suffix. We're not exactly sure the father. It's very important to know who the father is, and this one we don't know 100%, so she can't rely on that chazaka. So it might be a case where Rabban Gamliel says, yes, the woman herself who shows up pregnant, she's kosher to marry a Kohen, but the daughter who's then born, mazel tov, but she's not necessarily kosher. So it's so important to know who your father is, and all of us know Avinu Shebashamayim. You know, Avinu Shebashamayim is, in a sense, our father. Hashem calls us Banim Atem Lamakom. We are the sons of Hashem. So as long as we keep that in mind, we have a Cheskas Kashrus. If a Jew can keep in mind, this is one of the struggles in life that we all have, if you can remember that God is your father, God is watching you, and God is proud of you, and amazingly proud and happy when you learn Torah, when you do mitzvah, when you show up for the Daf Yomi. Hashem is so proud of us. He's a doting father, kiviyachol. And Hashem is disappointed, knows we can do better in those times and places when we could do better. Hashem is disappointed. So we see, if you want a cheskas kashrus in life, you want to make yourself a kosher, always remember who your father is, who your big father is. You know, the Avinu Shebashamayim, the Eibishter, as they say. So it's cheskas kashrus. Good. Eisive Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Elazar challenges Rabbi Yochanan. But made divine memorim be'edus isha begufa. So we say, when does this apply that Rabban Gamliel believes her on herself, on the woman who shows up pregnant? Of all edus isha bebita, but about her daughter, divrei kol of vlad shtuki. They could say the vlad, the offspring, is a shtuki. That's from lashon shtika, silence, that we've seen earlier. If this kid, the shtuki is a lashon suffix, if he points at someone and says, Abba, Abba, Tati, Tati, his mother says, shh, because the mother doesn't necessarily know, and the kid doesn't know, so he's trying to find his father. It's a sad situation. He's growing up without a father, and he's looking for a father figure, but his mother tells him shtok, tells him to be quiet, because she doesn't know who the father figure is here. So my love, shtuki upasul. So when we say shtuki here, isn't this shtuki and pasul? Because a shtuki is a lashon suffix. And if a person has a suffix in lineage, he's not going to be marrying into kahuna, or the Kohen can't be marrying her. Lo shtuki v'kosher. No, it could be a shtuki and a kosher. Mi ik a shtuki kosher. That sounds contradictory. Can someone with suffix, with doubtful lineage, also be called a kosher in? Yeah, there is such a case. Very interesting case, Rabbi Sai. Kiddush Shmuel. Shmuel brings the case to Amar Shmuel. Asora Kohanim Omdim. There were 10 Kohanim standing around. They're having their truma for lunch, whatever it is. They're doing Kohen stuff, 10 of them. Perish Echad Mechen Ubol. And one of these 10 Kohanim, we don't know which one, went and lived with a woman. At Basel Tov, she got pregnant. Havlad shtuki. Now this vlad is a shtuki. My shtuki. What do you mean he's shtuki? What do you mean he's a suffix? What kind of suffix is there? We know the father was a Kohen. We just don't know which one. If we silence him from inheriting the Yerusha, the property of the father, pshita, that's obvious. He doesn't know exactly who his father is. It's one of these 10 Kohanim. But if you don't know which one, then this person cannot claim any share of their nachala. The brothers can say, listen, we don't know your brother. You don't know your brother. There's no genetic testing going on. So get out of here. We don't know who his father is, so therefore he can't inherit anything from any of these 10 men. So we silence him from the laws of a Kohen. Because there's a special pasuk by Kohanim that there's a higher level expected for the yichus of Kohanim. V'haita lo ulzaro acharav brit kihunat olam. Sounds familiar? Pinchas, anybody? Yeah, Pinchas, beautiful. So it's Nogea. We're learning up Pinchas, and in the Daf Yomi we're learning up Pinchas, Parsha Shuvah. So it will be to him and his seed after him, Brit Kihunot Olam, a covenant of eternal Kihuna, priesthood. Mi Shazar Miyuchas Acharav. So the Gemara learns out someone whose children are miyuchas, are really related to him, are really following in his footsteps biologically, not just culturally. This excludes this son of one of the 10 Kohanim. He doesn't have a sure yichus. He's a shtuki, he's a suffix. He doesn't know exactly who the father is. He knows he's a Kohen. He just doesn't know from which father. So therefore he's shtok, he's silenced from claiming the rights and privileges of a Kohen. Now the Rashi here says something amazing. Rashi says, Shalo Yavod Avoda, he can't do the Avoda. Okay, we understand that Pasuk's written about Avoda. If he comes to the base of Mikdash, Bimheira B'Yameinu should be built, and he wants to do an avoda, then they're going to say, listen, we don't know if you're from our Beisav, from our family, go do avoda with the other family next week, when the next family's turn is. Now Rashi says something else amazing, Lo Yochel B'Truma, he can't eat Truma. Now this is a little bit of a sore point, because Truma is called Mamon Shevet. It's called the property of the entire tribe of the Kohanim. So Truma doesn't belong to one specific Kohen, it belongs to all of the Kohanim. So we know this man is a Kohen, we just don't know who the father is, but the father was for sure a Kohen. So it sounds very strange that he can't eat the Truma. By the way, Mishnah Yomi is in Masechet Truma towards the end. Great time to jump in. It's always a great day to jump into Mishnah Yomi, jump right in and learn to swim in the sea of Truma, which could be, because Truma could be wine or oil also, so in theory it could be. Anyway, Rashi says he can't eat Truma. The Ritva says no. The Ritva says this pasuk's talking about Avoda. Truma is not an Avoda. Truma is a privilege. We know he's a Kohen, so he should be able to eat Truma. So it's a machlokis rishonim if such a Kohen, shtuki, quasi-shtuki, could eat Truma. Last line of 13b, Hahu Arus V'Rusatu. There was an Arus, remember he's engaged. They did a Kedushin already. They did an Erusin, therefore he's an Arus, and a Rusato. And we've learned previously in this parak, they would sometimes wait up to 12 months between the Erusin and the Nisuin, and sometimes people got into trouble during those 12 months, which is one of the reasons we do them together under the chuppah. We do the Kiddushin, the Erusin under the chuppah. It saves a lot of these headaches and heartaches, but in this case, Hahu Arus V'Rosato, Atul Kamid Rav Yosef. They came to Rav Yosef. Important to note, Rav Yosef was in Bavel. This was not in Yehuda during the Greek occupation or the Roman occupation when certain leniencies were allowed, as we saw a couple days ago. This was in Bavel. They came in front of Rav Yosef. He Amra Minehu, Minei. She says, this belly, you see, it's not because I'm eating too many Doritos, it's because I'm pregnant and it's his child. Hu Amar, turning to the top of Yudala, the top of the hand, Rabbosai, in Minai. He says, yes, it's my baby. And the Rashi on top says, Emes mimenihu. Really, it's my baby. Now, it's a funny thing for him to say. She says it's his baby. He says it's the baby. So what does he have to say that for? So you should know the Tosfos on the bottom of 13b that continues to the top of 14a, the Tosfos says we're going to see a case in Kiddushin coming up soon. In Asar Yechsin, near the end of Kiddushin, we bring a case where a couple was engaged and they might have been together, and she shows up pregnant. And in that case, there's a machlokis if that Vlad is a mamzer or a shtuki. Now that sounds a lot worse than this case we're going to see where Rav Yosef is going to say kosher lagamre. It's totally a kosher kid. So what's different over there? Taiso speaks out over there, the engaged couple, the Arus and the Rasato, it's the first stage of marriage, they were together once in that case. And there's an amazing Gemara, and you might remember it from Yevamos, Rabbosai, and there's an amazing Gemara on Yevamos Samach Tes, and it speaks about a similar situation, by a woman who's engaged to a Kohen, and she shows up pregnant during the engagement, if she can still marry the Kohen, she can still eat the Truma. And the Gemara says, what are you worried about? And they say, De'amrinan mid afkara nafsha, since she frees her spirit, Lagabe Arus, for her engaged Arus, Afkara nafsha la'oma, she might free her spirit to anyone. So this is back in the 60s when they talked about free spirits, in San Francisco and things like this. I think they were reading up this Gemara, Afkara Nafsha, free spirit. So in this case, we're actually worried that she was too free of a spirit, because if a woman was willing to break the very strong social norms against premarital intimacy with one man, she might do so with other men as well, and that would be a big problem for her truma consumption and her marriage. So that's the free spirit that the Gemara brings on Yevamos Samachtes, Amud Beis. So Tosfos speaks out that kind of situation. There was one time behind closed doors with Ars Rosato, but he says in this situation, this man is very sure of himself. So the Tosfos ends up saying, he says this child is kosher to everyone. Even Rabbi Yeshua would agree here. This child is kosher. This couple that came in front of Yosef, and he says, yes, it's definitely mine. Rashi says, emes, it's his. He says, how does that work? When he says it's definitely my baby, how does he know? It wasn't just once, Rabbi Say. It wasn't just a one-time thing. He went to the father-in-law's house in Yehuda. It wasn't that. It was they were really together, mamish, they were together, possibly living together before the chuppah, and that's why she's sure and he's sure they are bari, they're not shema, and so this case is definitely kosher, not like other cases we've seen in Yevamos and we'll see in Kedushin. So Amar of Yosef, Lamai Nechash, what are we worried about, law? What are we worried about with her? Of course it's kosher. Chada, the Haka Mode. She's Mode and he's Mode. Va'od, Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Chalacha ben Gamliel. And Shmuel, we saw yesterday, and the Rambam brought also as a Chalacha. Chalacha is like Rabban Gamliel. We believe the woman who shows up pregnant, who the father is. Amar le Abaye, Vaha, Ki lo Mode, Mach Rabban Gamliel. And Abaye says, in this case, would Rabban Gamliel really be machshir if he did not admit he was the father? Hamar le Shmuel, Rav Yehuda, but Shmuel himself told his star student, Rav Yehuda, Shinana, sharp one, Shinan Tam Levanecha, get sharp. Halacha Rabban Gamliel, yes, the halacha lemaisa is like Rabban Gamliel, but va'at lo tavi duvda, but don't do it lemaisa, don't rely on it in practice, ad deika rov kasherim etzla, unless you have rov kasherim. So what Rabban Gamliel said, what Shmuel is saying, Rabban Gamliel, is that yes, his psak halacha does apply, but you shouldn't really rely on it unless rov kasherim. For instance, it was a Jewish city. Not that she was among bandits who are non-Jewish, who might have taken advantage, but she was in a Jewish city, and then she shows up pregnant. Rov of the people there are kasherim, so that would be fine. HaRav Pesulin etzla, but in this case, the majority is puzzle. Rashi speaks out, she's engaged. Engagement is the first stage of a Jewish marriage, so every single person in the world is asur deraisa, because she's an Eishes Ish, except for her engaged husband, her quasi-husband. That's the only person who's mutter for her. So, if she was with him, great, but, not great, we're not condoning it, but it's great for the yichus of the kid. But if she was with anyone else in the world, it's puzzle her up from Truma, from Cohen, and from her husband as well. The Gemara continues, and for this reasoning, Tikshelachi Gufa. So why don't you ask a kasha on this statement itself, halacha? That you could say the halachas like Rabban Gamliel will rely on her to say who she's pregnant from, but don't do it. So what is Shmuel really saying to Rav Yehuda? He says, lechatchila, don't rely on Rabban Gamliel. For instance, if a Kohen, Aaron Cohen, comes and says he wants to marry Plonit, Mrs. Ploni, and we know that she had been pregnant before from somebody. So lechatchila, we wouldn't tell them to go ahead and get married. We'd tell Aaron Cohen to go find someone who is not a midaberet and not a me'uberet, just to be on the safe side. But b'diavad, if they're already married, we would allow them to remain married because it's only a suffix that her chazaka of being kosher to kahuna has been broken. Haname k'diavad dami, this situation also, the engaged couple showing up in the rabbi's office and she's already pregnant, this is considered a b'diavad. Because Rashi speaks out, if we are machmir and we say, no, we need a rov kasheri, and here it's rov pesulin because she's engaged, she's quasi-married already, then we're going to make her usher to her husband, and we're also going to make the child a suffix mamzer. Now, suffix mamzer in some ways is worse than a vadai mamzer. A vadai mamzer can marry a vadai mamzer, but a suffix mamzer cannot because he's only a suffix. So it's a very difficult situation. It's a b'diavad. So we're going to rely on Rabban Gamliel to say we believe her, and we also have the supporting testimony of the husband who was Ragil Itzlah. Rami le'abaye le'rava miyam Rabbi Yeshua ein nemenis. Does Rabbi Yeshua in our Mishnah say she's never believed? The woman is not believed to say who the father of the child was. Or minhu, let's ask a contradiction from the Brisa. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira, almanus Isa. They testified about something called an almanus Isa. Now, Isa means a doe. And we're going to see there was some sort of suffix mixed into her familial dough. Shehi kishera lekahuna. They testified she's kosher to marry a Kohen, even though she has this suffix in her yichus somewhere. Amar lehachi hashta. Is this a fair comparison? Chosam isha nises badekes fenises. When a woman gets married, she checks out the situation. She makes sure that the husband she's marrying is not a suffix hollow, does not have problems with yichus. And then she gets married. This reminds us of another case in Yevamos. When did we say a woman was very careful to get married in Yevamos? Or both say? This was like a month ago. Remember? Isha Rabba, Isha Shaholcha Baila Medina Sayam, right? I see some nods. I see a few nods, so that's good. That's good. We remember Yevamos. The case of Aguna, Rabosai, that Chazal, our sages, were makel by an Aguna to let her remarry on the basis of one witness, even on the basis of some attenuated testimony, because she's daika uminsava. She's diuk. She's very careful before she gets remarried. She checks it out. She hires a private investigator, or she gets this one aide a little intoxicated, so he spills the beans. She does something to check it out before she gets married. So here too, we say a woman checks out the situation, looks for possible yichus problems before she gets married. So we can rely on the fact that even though she's an almanas Isa, that she married into a family with something in the dough. Just like a dough, you put in the flour and the sugar and the water and everything, but everything mixes up and you don't know where the sugar is anymore. It's in there somewhere. So there's a pagam, there's a puzzle somewhere in this family, but we assume she checks it out before she gets married. Hacha isha mizane, bodegas mizane. Is a fair comparison? Is a woman who's mizane, who's living outside of marriage, does she check out who she's with before she goes ahead and does it? So it's a rhetorical question. Of course she doesn't. The problem is there's a Taisves on the top of Amud Beis yesterday, and he says, he says, yeah, they do. They do to some degree. If they, and he's comparing to the case where Nebuch, a woman was shavuya, where she was captured, where she has no choice, versus a woman in the city who she might have some discernment. She's not acting in a discerning fashion because she's going behind closed doors with a man, but she's a little picky, she's a little discerning, and maybe she'll have in mind, well, I don't want to be with this particular man because he's a chalol, and I don't want to mess myself up for a Kohen. So she's planning ahead. There's also an amazing Gemara in Yevamos Lamed Hey, and it was this was a while back, so don't be shocked if you don't remember it. But they said that a woman who is on the path to conversion, or she's a shivcha, she's a servant, and she thinks she's going to be freed, she will be mechafeches. She'll practice a form of rudimentary birth control if she's mizaneh. So she won't be pregnant when she becomes fully Jewish, and she'll have her options open. So she's planning ahead. This is according to Rabbi Yossi there. She doesn't even need chodshei chavchana. She doesn't even need to wait 3 months after she converts or she's fully freed and fully Jewish, because she was careful. She was discerning while she was in the prior situation, so she wouldn't show up pregnant when she might have more options in life. So she's planning ahead to some degree. So it's a comparison we make between Mizana and Nisuin. So obviously a woman getting married is going to be Daikon and Mensiva. She's going to be very careful who she marries. So we can assume she checked it out and she's not marrying the particular guy from the family that has some sort of suffix, some sort of Isa, some sort of dough where there's a cholol mixed up in it. Amarava le Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua kosher. So there's a kasha in Rabbi Yeshua. So here Rabbi Yeshua is testifying that almanas Isa, a widow who her husband was some sort of suffix from a family where there's a suffix we're going to see, he's testifying she's kosher lekahuna. But in the Mishnah, he said a woman who shows up, she was medaberet, she's me'uberet, she's not kosher lekahuna. So he says it's a kasha. It's Rabban Gamliel lo kasha. And the Gemara says, no, is there no kasha in Rabban Gamliel? Hakatani Seifa, but the Seifa of this Mishnah Adiyas, it says, Amar Len Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says back to Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira, who testified this almanas Isa, this widow from a Suffolk Cholo family, is kosher. He says, Ki balnu edutchem, I've accepted your testimony. This is an eduyos, where Chazal was coming to testify to certain halachas they had learned in previous generations. But what can we do, says Rabban Gamliel in response? Shari Gozer Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that in previous generations, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a gezerah, shalo lahoshiv bezdin al kach. We don't convene a bezdin to make a psak halacha that an almanas isa is kosher lekahuna. Why? She kohanim shomin lachem. The kohanim would listen to the bezdin lerochek, to be machmir, to not marry such a woman, avol lo lekarev, but not to be mekel and marry her. So it's an amazing situation. The kohanim themselves were so machmir and so exacting on their yichus that they would refuse to marry such a woman, even if the bezdin gadol paskins publicly that she was mutter to kohanim. So he says, yeah, your edus is good edus. This almanas isa, we're going to define later what this is. She should be kosher lekahuna. She should be, but the kohanim themselves won't listen to us. So the bezdin is not going to get up there and make a psak halacha, and then the kohanim will say, no, that's ridiculous. Forget that. We're machmir. So we're not going to do that. The bezdin's not going to act if the people are going to ignore the psak. And here the kohanim are very machmir, and they're not going to do it. So there's no contradiction, Rabban Gamliel. Ela amar Rava de Rabban Gamliel lo kasha. It's not a contradiction here. Hatam bari hacha shema. So it's very different. In the case of the Mishnah, where Rabban Gamliel is matir the woman, and we believe the woman, she's a bari. She says, I know who the man was. But here, it's a shema. It's a maybe. Why? Because she's almanas isa. Now we'll get into the Rashi here. Rashi has actually two definitions of almanas isa, the widow of the dough. Now remember, there's some sort of chalal, some sort of problem mixed up into the dough of the family that she married into. So Rashi first says, almanas isa. He says, what happened? Kigon, for example, shezorak bal imo, the husband of the mother of her husband. So she marries this fellow, and his mother, the mother-in-law, Risha-in-law get. The husband threw her a get. But there's a problem. As we're going to see in Gittin, throwing a get is, guys, don't throw a get. You should never have to give a get, but if you do, don't throw the thing, please. Because there's a problem. Safek karov lo, safek karov law. So he throws the get at his wife, but we don't know when it landed, it was kind of fluttering in the air. It's a piece of paper. Did it land closer to him, in which case it's still his, and there's no divorce happened, or closer to her, in which case if it's within her dalet amas, it's close enough, we consider it hers, and they're divorced. But then umes, and then Nebuchadnezzar has a heart attack after he threw the get so far, and he dies. So we don't know, is this woman, who's the mother-in-law, is she migareshes, is she divorced, or almana, a widow? And then what does she do? Vanasa Cohen. And this woman, the mother-in-law, marries a Cohen, Chalid Menu Ben, and has a son. Now the problem is, a Cohen can't marry a migareshes. If she was really divorced, the Cohen shouldn't marry her, and the son is a chalal. He's puzzled to be a Cohen. He's a chalal. But we don't know if she was divorced or not. We're really not sure. Zeyu safek chalal. So it's a safek chalal, and this is the almanas isa, according to the first pshat in Rashi, and he says we rely on the chazaka that she was a married woman and then he died. So we're relying on this to be matir her. Now Rashi gives a second pshat in the wide lines of Rashi. The first wide line of Rashi is Medivri Rabbi Yosef Tov Olam. I don't know Rabbi Yosef Tov Olam, but Rashi did. Matzati almanas isa isha shehaya baila safek sveika. There are two sveikas, a sveika, a double doubt here. She was divorced from the first husband, Safek Karav Lo, Safek Karav Law, same situation. They threw the get, they don't know who the get is closer to. Umeis, and then the first husband died, so we don't know if she's a divorcee or a widow. Betoch Shlosha Chodshim, and it's within 3 months, Nisit Lakohen, Toch Shlosha Chodshim. She doesn't wait the 3-month waiting period to figure out who is the father of the child. She marries a Kohen. The Yolda Ezei Safek Shu Ben Tishul Rishon. So we don't know if he's a 9-month baby from the first husband or a 7-month baby from the second husband. Recall we talked about in Yavamas, back then there was a different medical mitzias where not infrequently, it was not uncommon, it was not the majority, but not uncommonly, a baby would be born fully developed after 7 months. So if we had a woman who did not wait 3 months between the first husband and the second husband, and then 7 months later she has a baby, we're really not sure who the father is. It could be a 9-month term baby from the first, or a 7-month term baby from the second. So that's the case here, whereas a suffix, if she was a widow or a divorcee. And even if she was a divorcee, we're not sure about this child. Is it a child from the first husband, in which case it's a Yisrael and it's kosher? Or is it a child from the second husband, in which case if she was divorcee, he's a Kohen, but he's a Chalal. He's a Pasal Chalal. And then we're talking about the widow who married this man. So it's a Sfeik Sveika, or at least one suffix, but attenuated because it's a suffix in the mother, and she married the son. So Almanas Isa, not a Pashut thing, but we saw that Rabban Gamliel wanted to be Mekel and Matar to Kahuna, but the Kohanim themselves were Machmir. But in that case, it's a Shema, it's a maybe. Whereas in the Mishnah, where Rabban Gamliel believes the woman about the father of her child, it's a Bari, she knows. Rabbi Yeshua, Nami lo kasha. There's also not a kasha in Rabbi Yeshua, who is Mekel by the Almanas Isa and Machmir in our Mishnah by the pregnant girl. Hasam, Had Sveika, Hachatrei Sveiki. There's one suffix. Who's the father? Here, there's two Sveikas, like in Rashi's explanation that he got from Rav Yosef Tavolim, that it's a suffix if the mother was divorced or widowed, and it's a suffix if it's the child of the first husband or the second husband. Tosfos doesn't like either explanation of Rashi. He says Almanas Isa, we use the word Isa to connote a family, not one person. He says we're going to see later in Kiddushin the term Kol Aratzos Isa Eretz Yisrael, that other lands are considered Isa, considered mixed and tainted lineage compared to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael Isa LaBavel, but Bavel had even more pure lineage than Eretz Yisrael. He says we're going to discuss it like that. Taisvos doesn't necessarily like Rashi's Pshat. You can see the Taisvos in the medium lines for your homework, please. Hilkach Rabban Gamliel, so Trei Sveiki. So Yeshua is Mekel because there's Trei Sveiki. Sveika for Almanas Isha. Hilkach Rabban Gamliel, Olim Le Bari. Rabban Gamliel says a Bari claim, a certain claim, a confident claim is very powerful, very Olim. De'afilu b'chad Sveika, even if there's one doubt, Nami Machsher. Even if there's one reason to doubt, we're not sure who the father is, he says it's kosher. We believe this woman to say who the father is. V'kille, and he says it's very, very light, not very powerful. A shema, a possible claim of, well, maybe this guy was kosher. Maybe there was no chalal with this man that she had been widowed from. Tefila b'sfeik sveika, even a sfeik sveika like the Almanas Isa, nami pasal. He also says it's pasal. Rabbi Yeshua, alim le chad sfeik. Rabbi Yeshua says one suffix is very strong, a very strong reason for concern. Tefila b'bari, even when the woman is sure who the father was, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't believe her. Nami posel, says she's posel l'kahuna. The kile sfeik sveika, but a sfeik sveika is very lenient, according to Rabbi Yeshua. Tefilu b'shema, even when the widow is not sure her husband was a chalal, suffik chalal, or suffik who the father was. Nami machsher, he says it's kosher. So we see there's a different focus. Rabban Gamliel's focused on the clarity of their claim. Is it bari, a sure thing, or shema? Maybe. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua is focused on the number of sveikas. If you have one doubt, well, he's not going to believe what she says because there's one doubt about who the father is. If there's two doubts, yeah, there's a halal somewhere, but we're not sure if it's him, we're not sure if it's a halal at all, then he is more mekel. So it depends what you focus on. Tana Rabbana, the Bryce teaches, Eizehu Almanas Isa. Now we've spoken out, Rashi had two pshatim in Almanas Isa, and Tosfos didn't like either of them. The Gemara says, Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzerus. There's no mamzerus mixed up with this person, this family. Lo mishum netinus. He's not a notin. That's the famous Givonim who converted in the days of, some came in the days of Yehoshua, some came in the days of Moshe, and they falsely converted. They were Canaanites who weren't supposed to convert, and they falsely pretended to be not Canaanites to convert to Judaism. Velo mishum avdei malachim, and they're not from the servants of the kings. Rashi speaks out that in the days of Shlomo HaMelech had these avodim who were Hayu Ashirim Balei Zerah, Naslim B'nai Yisrael. They were very rich. Now they were avodim, they were servants, but because they were the servants of Shlomo HaMelech, they were exceptionally rich and exceptionally powerful. They had political influence, social influence, and even though they were still avodim, Lamaisa, but they were fairly rich and powerful and married Jewish girls. So that's a problem because they are still, their yichus is still avodim. And he says another pshat is they are descendants of Hordus, Herod. You've heard of Herod, right? Yeah, Hordus. He was an Eved, a servant to the Hashmonaim, who actually we're going to see in Bava Basra. He rebelled against the Hashmonaim and killed out most of them and married the last surviving princess of the Hashmonaim. And then there's a whole thing there. She apparently committed suicide and announced, if anyone says they're a Hashmonaim, they're really from Herdus and they're really an Eved. It's a whole story there. So if someone has Avdei Malachim in their lineage, that's a problem, a serious problem. So Almanas Isa is not one of these. These are more serious problems. Almanas Isa, Amar Rabbi Meir, turning over to Amud Beis. Shemati kol she'ein ba achad mikol elu, who doesn't have one of those three problems. The mamzer, the natin, the avdei malachim, masin lekahuna, could marry a Kohen. So she has some kind of problem. She's Almanas Isa. There's some sort of halal, suffix halal there, but not a mamzer, natin, or eved. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, V'ken Chaya Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, Omer Kidvarav. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar and also Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh say, like him, Ezi Almanas Isa. Which one is this Almanas Isa that we're going to say, yeah, she married into a suffix family, but it's not so bad. Kol shenitma ba suffix cholol, when there's a suffix cholol in the family, like they threw the get, or they're not sure where the father was, and someone there is a cholol, but we're not sure it was her husband, so we're not sure that she's a cholala herself. Well, and they explain why in this case. Makirin Yisrael mamzerim shebneim, because Jews know where the mamzers are. Ein makirin chalalim shebneim, but they don't necessarily know where the chalalim are, because mamzeris Rabbosai is a very big problem. If somebody is, God forbid, a mamzer, they can't marry into the general population of the Jewish people. They can only marry another mamzer or a convert, and their pool is limited. So the Jews keep track of who the mamzerim are, but a chalal is only a problem for kohanim. For everyone else, a chalal is kosher. A chalal could literally marry any woman. If a man's a chalal, he can marry anyone. Now, if he marries a normal Jewish woman, she becomes a halala, and she can't later marry a Kohen if this first husband drops dead and she's a widow. But he can technically marry anyone. It's not a big deal. So since it's not a big deal for non-Kohen, it's only a big deal for Kohanim. So because that's the case, we don't keep track so carefully of where the halalim are, only the mamzerim. So the Gemara is going to explain what this third opinion is adding to the first two opinions. Amar Mar, Ezihu Manas Isa, which one's Manas Isa? Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzeris, lo mishum netinas, lo mishum avdei malachim. Again, there's no mamzer in her family, not a natin or a givoni, and not the servants of the kings who illegally married regular Jewish girls. Ha-chalol kasher, but if there's a chalol somewhere in the family, she married into a family of chalalim, we don't necessarily assume that she herself became a chalala. From the suffix, she keeps her chazaka of being kasher l'kahuna, and she's still kasher. Maishna chanach deraisa. So we asked, what are these first three things? They're deraisa. A mamzer, a natin, and eved, these are psulim deraisa, someone who marries, or even, Rashi points out, back in Yevamos, Samaches, we said even a Bas Kohen who's nivala to one of these people can't eat truma anymore. She becomes a chalala. She becomes psula to eat the truma, psula to marry a Kohen, even based on a bia with one of these people. It's a psul deraisa. And Rashi brings the pasuk, Kitia Ish Zar, right? The Ish Zar, nivala pasuk lakuna. Good. So, it's not good. Not good. Lo yachal zoro. Good. So these are deraisa apostle, halal nami deraisa. So the halal nami is deraisa lo yachal zoro. Not just her becomes a halala, but even the children become halalim. They can't marry kohanim. Vesu, and also Amar Rabbi Meir shemati kol she'ein ba achad mikol elu masin lekahuna. Rabbi Meir says one who doesn't have one of the first three problems, the mamzer, the natin, the eved, they can marry a kohen. It's merely a problem of halala. Hainu Tanakama, that's the same thing the Tanakama said, that only mamzer, nasin, and eved was a problem, and not halala, not suffix halala. Vesu, and also the third opinion, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Meir, V'ken Hai Rabbi Shimon ben Yasu, Meir Kidvarav, Ezihu Almanas Isa. The third opinion in the Brisa said, what's the Almanas Isa? Kol shenitma ba sfek halal, when there's a suffix halal mixed into that family that she had married into. And they explain, because Makirin Yisrael mamzerim shebneim, the Yisraelim know where the mamzerim are. V'ein makirim chalalim shebneim, they don't necessarily know where the chalalim are. So how does that help? How does it help the Almanas Isa to be kosher l'kahuna? Ha'amra the Reisha, halal kosher, but the Reisha already said a halal's kosher. So now it sounds like the second opinion is just copying the first opinion, and the third opinion is saying the halal's kosher because we know where the mamzerim are, but we don't know where the halalim are. But Lamaisa, if we don't know who the halalim are, how can we say it's Almanas Isa, who married into a family with a halal somewhere? How can we say she's kosher l'kahuna? Of course the Kohanim aren't going to believe us. So Rabbi Kalman was right at Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yochanan explains, what's the case? Mamzer tzoveach, the screaming mamzer. That's not what it means. Rashi explains, what does it mean? It means if Reuven calls Shimon a mamzer, and Shimon starts screaming, I'm not a mamzer, don't be ridiculous, there's no way I'm a mamzer, my family, we go back to Ezra Cohen, chulu v'chulu. He starts screaming in protest that he's not a mamzer whenever he's accused of being a mamzer. This is the mamzer tzeveach. We're talking about halal shotek, or a halal shotek, Reuven accused the same Shimon, oh, you come from Halalim. And he's like, okay, who cares? Shtika kehoda, if someone remains silent in the face of an accusation, it's like admitting. So ika benayu. That's the difference. According to Yochanan, he explains the mamzer tzaveach cholashotek. That's the difference. But how? The Tanakama savar kol pasul dekaru levishosik. If you call somebody a name, and not just a name, but you call the guy a mamzer, a nasan, a givoni, a cholol, and he's quiet, pasul. So he's pasul. So he can't marry into kuna. Hachikamar, and this is what Hachikamar Tanakama. This is what the Tanakama, the first thing the Bryce is saying. Ezehu Almanas Isa. Which one is the widow from the family with a suffix cholol in it? Kol she'ein ba, when there's no problem of shtok mamzerut, lo shtok netinot, lo shtok avdei malachim, lo shtok cholol. When there's no accusations flying, when no one in this family is getting accused of being a mamzer or an eved or a cholol and remaining silent. Because if they had remained silent, then we have some sort of doubt. Hey, maybe they're silent because they're admitting to this attack on their yichus. Rabbi Meir replies to the Tanakama, so these first three, the mamzer, the notin, and the eved, those are psula kol. If somebody really was one of those things, they can't marry into the general population of ashtok cholol, but if someone was accused of being a cholol and remained silent, kosher. He's still kosher. The almana who married into that family is kosher to marry a Cohen, and her daughter's kosher to marry a Cohen. The Shasiks, why was he quiet? Not because he's admitting, Mishum de lo ichbas. He doesn't mind to be called a cholol. He says, so what, I'm a cholol. I can still marry any Jewish girl I want to. It doesn't affect him. He's not a Cohen personally. It's not a problem. Kamar le Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar letanakama, the Rabbi Meir. So what Rabbi Shimon adds the third opinion, Ish mi'alach de machsher Rabbi Meir b'shtika lo dekaro le cholol. He says, no, Rabbi Meir doesn't mean when someone was called a cholol and remained silent. He doesn't mean that's kosher. If someone accused somebody, if Reuven accused Shimon of being a mamzer and Shimon is silent, that's not because he's really a mamzer. He's not admitting it. The high, the shasik, why is he silent in the face of mamzer accusations? Savar mamzer kola isle. Mamzer has a voice. Now, we don't mean mamzerim are good at singing. We mean that people know about it. As we said before, the Yisraelim keep track of where the mamzerim are so that the mamzerim can marry the mamzerim and aren't going to infringe on the yichus of the general population. So that's why he was quiet in the face of being accused of being a mamzer, because he doesn't have to protest because everyone knows he's not a mamzer, because everyone knows who the real mamzerim are. Aval mamzer v'tzavach halav v'shoisik. But if he's accused of being a mamzer and he starts screaming and yelling in protest, or he's accused of being a cholol and he remains silent, shtika kuda, pasul, he should be considered pasul. And it should be the almanas isa would not be kosher in that case. She had married into such a family. V'hai the ashtik, why was he quiet? Savar mistayeya delo mapkil mikol. He says, good enough, they haven't removed me from the call. So if they accuse him of being a cholol, he says, I don't care, I can still marry into the call, marry any normal Jewish woman, because it doesn't affect me personally to be called a cholol, because I'm not a Kohen anyway. So Tani Chada Rabbi Yossi Omer Shtoik Mamzer Kosher Shtoik Cholol Pasul. So Rabbi Yossi is saying if someone is accused of being a mamzer and they're quiet, it's kosher because everyone knows where the mamzerim are. He doesn't have a need to fight back. Shtoik Cholol Pasul. And if he's quiet in the face of being accused of a cholol, he's pasul, meaning the almanas isa is pasul to marry a Kohen. Tani Idach, another brayso says Shtoik Cholol Kosher Shtoik Mamzer Pasul, that if he remains silent in the face of being called a halal, he is still kosher because it's not a big deal. That's why he does not protesting, but if he's called a mamzer and he doesn't fight back, he's pasul. Lo kasha Tanakama liba Rabbi Meir, Hadar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar liba Rabbi Meir. So it's a difference of opinions of the middle Rabbi Meir, the last Rabbi Meir. So you should know that the Ran says this halacha does not apply right now. This is not to any of us, Rabbi say. The Ran says this only applies if Shimon's from a family where there is an issue, where this Shimon's family does have doubtful yichus, and people come up to him and say, hey, your family's from Chalalim. Then if he doesn't say anything in response, then we do, in fact, think he might be a Cholol. Now the Ravid on the Rambam, he comments, this does not apply at all in Zman Hazeh, because it used to be that what would the Beis Din do is that if somebody was accused of being a mamzer or a Cholol or a Givoni or whatever, then that had a right in court that you could go to court and have the accuser flogged. So if Reuven accused Shimon of being from a family of mamzerim, Shimon could sue Reuven in court and get Reuven publicly lashed for those making false accusations. He says that the Beis Din doesn't do this anymore because people throw out these accusations, they get angry, they start fighting, and they call each other names, so the Beis Din doesn't take it seriously, and you should not take it seriously. The Ravid says, shtika is the best course of action. If somebody is attacking your yichus, then being silent and not fighting and arguing shows you are miyuchas tefei, that you have the best yichus. Because you're not fighting about this, you have no need to defend yourself because your yichus is good to go. We see this, that, if false accusations get punished, there are less false accusations and the real accusations are taken more seriously. So it's interesting, by Halal and Mamzer, they disagree which one's more serious, less serious, but to all of them, the natin is very serious. Now, Lamaisa, what's a natin? So I thought you'd never ask. We learned about this way back in Yevamos. This was 2 months ago, Rabosai, and it's such an amazing Gemara that we need to share it because not everyone was here for Yevamos, and even if you were here for Yevamos, Lamaisa, it was 2 months ago, and the Daf Yomi flies, and that's the matzav. So remember, this is in Yevamos Ayin Ches Ayin Tes, the story of the Givonim. So the Natinim are also the Givonim. Rashi points out, Shnis Gairu be'arema b'mei Yeshua. They came as a group in the days of Yeshua. Natnam avodim achad ve'etzim shavdim mayim. They were given over, called Natim, because they were given over to the Kohanim to be servants, to be the wood hewers and the drawers of water. And then what happened? Shaul killed out Nov Ir Kohanim. Remember, David HaMelech was pretending to be on a secret mission and got supplies from Nov. And then in his revenge, Shaul HaMelech killed the Kohanim of Nov. Most of the Kohanim died, and the Givonim had no work anymore, and they were very upset. So remember, in the days of David later on, there was a great famine. And David HaMelech asked prophetically, what's the cause? And one of the causes was the Givonim had not been appeased. So David HaMelech goes to the Givonim, to the Natinim, and he says, I will give you anything. Kesef, Zahav, I will, elevate you in social status. You'll be amazing. You'll be great. And they say, no, we don't want money. We don't want food. We don't want jobs. We want you to take 7 descendants of Shaul HaMelech and publicly execute them and leave them hanging. Kill alas Hashem Talui. That's Asur Deraisa. We don't, even if the Beis Din executes somebody, we don't leave them hanging for more than a couple minutes. We do it right before Shkia and we take them down. It's a Chilul Hashem to do such a thing. And David HaMelech tries to talk them out of it and says, listen, it's revenge. Revenge is Asur Deraisa. They say, nope, we want you to kill 7 descendants of Shaul HaMelech. And the Gemara there comments, he says, Shlosha Simanim Yesh Ba'umazu. The Jewish people, the real Jewish people, the Miyuchas Jewish people have 3 character traits. Rachmanim, Baishanim, Gamli Chasadim. They are merciful. They are, Baishan. They're tsunua. They're not brazen. Gamli Chasadim, and they give chesed. And the Givonim have, gone the opposite direction. So what happened was David HaMelech had to acquiesce. There was a famine. There was a plague. People were dying from it. So he had to acquiesce to the demands for revenge of the Givonim. And even though he had to leave the bodies hanging, in the Gemara comments, better to uproot 1 letter from the Torah, to make a Kiddush Hashem. What was the Kiddush Hashem with the execution? Why are these 7 guys hanging up? What's going on here? Halalu b'nei malachim, and the Jews would tell them, these are princes, these are descendants of royalty. Ma'asu pashtu yadeim begerim gerurim. Their grandfather, killed out Novir Kohanim, and the gerim, the lowly converts, lost their jobs. Amru ein lecha uma shiruyli davek ba kizo. They say there's no greater nation than this. Uma b'nei malachim kach. The princes, the officials, the ones with wealth and power, they get held accountable. So certainly the justice system is so upright that everyone will be held accountable for their misdeeds. And if lowly converts get protected so well by the Jewish judicial system, so we should become Jews and join you. So 150,000 people, 150,000 non-Jews joined the Jewish people, seeing this Kiddush Hashem. At the same time, the Givonim had a Gezeirah. They cannot marry into the Jewish people because they were not Rachmanim, they're not Gomlei Chasadim, they're not Baishanim, because they demanded revenge it turned out they were no longer fit to be a part of the Jewish people. So it's an amazing thing that sometimes people think that getting revenge will be the Kiddush Hashem, and I'll stand up for the oppression, I'll have my revenge. So the Givonim had the revenge, but they lost their status as part of the Jewish people. And the non-Jews who saw this revenge take place and saw that the Jewish people are exacting in their justice and don't protect the rich and the powerful from retribution, then they joined the Jewish people willingly. Shkoyach Rabosai, we'll pick it up in the Mishnah tomorrow.